Well. It's Tuesday, December 17th, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm Bob Harris. This is the Audible YouTube channel. It's time for On the Hot Seat. But first, footballguys.com. That's the website you must go to. All kinds of great information for you as you head into your fantasy playoffs. Appreciate you joining me here every Tuesday at this time. Also, Saturdays at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. I'll be here this Saturday as well. Hit the subscribe button, the notification bell. Like us, don't like us. Do all the YouTube-y stuff that makes people happy. Share us. It's great. And by us, I mean me and my fantastic guest. Another new Football Guy staffer. We have a handful of them. And this one I'm pretty familiar with from some in-season interactions. The great Jeff Blaylock is aboard. You can find him on the X Machine at Jeff Blaylock. I think the same thing at the Blue Ski too. Like me, we've got the same name. So, Jeff, welcome to the program. How are you?
I am great, Bob. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to have this chat and help some folks in their fantasy playoff matchups this week.
Yeah, it gets really tough. Hello, everybody. How are you? See the list of Lester in the house. Hey, Lester, is there any chance you're going to win the Football Guys Bowl? I've heard rumors. Andrea in the house. Hello, Andrea. How are you? Nice to see you. Oh, look at Joey Wright in the chat giving us eagle screams. Joey Wright sends me photos from zoos across the land of eagles from our Eagle Scream communion time. Always appreciate that. So we're going to get into the waiver wire here in just a minute. But first, I want to just Jeff talk a little bit about your background and what kind of good stuff we have you doing here at Football Guys.
Well, so far we've got me doing some waiver wire and start sit kinds of articles, and then I'm contributing some on the dynasty side in the roundtables. I've been in a couple of those, and the question this week is, name a player that hurt you in the fantasy playoffs. I'm like, well, where do I start? There's so many of them that have hurt me in the last few weeks. That's exciting to commiserate about. It's one of the great things about the fantasy football community, as you know, Bob, is we all go through these struggles and we go through them together, and we come out on the other side still good humans.
Right. So like something else that I know I see you in our chats on the site talking about a lot of Scott Fishbowl type things. Talk a little bit about your Scott Fishbowl experience so far this season and your love of the return men. This isn't arcade knowledge. I like to watch your stuff because I haven't tracked it as well. You keep very close track of this to the point where opposing kickers, what kind of returns they have against them. This is helpful stuff for people still in this league.
Well, Scott Fishbowl has been just a magical experience for me from the very moment that I got that email in April from Scott saying, here's your golden tickets. You're invited personally to going up to Denver for a live draft. And to anyone listening, if you are watching, you are invited to Scott Fishbowl. Please find a way to get to a live draft. You owe it to yourself to have that kind of experience and to meet people in person. The energy is infectious. The people are terrific. Just a terrific scene. But one thing Scott does every year is he comes up with a wrinkle in the scoring system that's usually fairly unique across the fantasy football space. This year, with the dynamic kickoff rules coming into the NFL, Scott placed a premium on return yards for the individual players. So we're often used to seeing returns lumped into the defense special teams bucket. Scott pulled them out and put them into the individual player bucket. And at 0.2 of a point per return yard, those add up very, very quickly. So I immediately ran those kinds of numbers and set on a strategy of locking in on drafting kick returners. And as the season began, I was not finding content out in the fantasy football space that I know of about the kick returners. So I just started doing it myself and started tracking the kickers and returners. Started with just reporting the data, and then have been adding more analysis and then recommendations as I've been going along through the season. It's been a lot of fun connecting with people. It's been a lot of fun helping some folks advance and commiserate with those who haven't. But for those of us who are still alive, and I am one of the 250, we're going to look at those matchups again this week. Lots of cold weather coming up this weekend. Cold weather equals shorter kicks equals more returns.
I'm so glad it's a charitable event because I feel much better about getting my ass handed to me. Sorry, Joe. Annually, as I have, and it's a ton of fun. And Jeff is entirely right. I met many great people, including Mr. Scampers, first in meeting and Dame Overboard at the LA a few years back. I've been doing the Dallas the last couple of years. It's been a ton of fun. I just noticed something that Joey called out here. Andrea, like she's killing it in the Football Guys Bowl is no surprise. Andrea Stislowski has been, I'm going to say it again, and I'm going to apologize again to Joe in advance, kicking ass in fantasy football since the day she showed up on my site, in my chats. It's been many years, Andrea. And Andrea asks the questions that you can tell she just destroys everyone in her drafts. She has those super tough decisions every week that comes from really smart drafting, right? Not like she's getting 4 guys that everyone's getting in the first round, but she's drafting guys later in the draft that end up rising up the ranks and forcing you into positions that are uncomfortable every week as you're making these lineup decisions. We're not going to make a lot of lineup decisions this week. We might get some questions about it. We'll see how it goes. I have to bring the muffins to tomorrow. I mean, it's true. It'll be okay. I see John Bonneville in the chat too. Nothing makes me happier than seeing John Bonneville in the chat. Look, John got his picture there now. Look at John go. Devin Hester and Dante Hall. Who are the top returners this year, Jeff? Who are the guys that have been getting it done? And like in Scott Fish, the bonus is if they have like even any offensive production at all. So are there any like that? And just who are the straight returners are really getting the job done?
Well, at the top of the list is going to be Kevontae Turpin of the Dallas Cowboys. He is a tremendously fast guy. He's really effective as both a kickoff returner, and a punt returner. And he has worked his way into the offense. He had a beautiful 93-yard touchdown reception earlier this season that put me over the top for that week. So I was very thankful for him there. Raheem Blackshear of Carolina is another stud in the kick return game. Unfortunately, he had a chest injury a couple of weeks ago. I didn't play last week. It's questionable this week. It was really sad last week because he had such a great matchup. That was going to be just lots of points. And instead, it went to the committee that they have in his absence. And then in terms of some of the straight returners, it's varying as we go through the season. I think they're taking a more of a hot hand approach with some of these kick returns and some of these situations. Of course, there's some places like up in Denver where you couldn't return a kick to save your life because the guy kicks it into the 5th row. But yeah, so it has been wobbling around. And while you carry on, let me pull up my stats in front of me, and I can pick out a couple more guys who have just been really critical this season for us.
While you're doing that, I will thank Joey for not throwing my status in the Football Guys Bowl into there. Lester, where are you at? What's your standing? Where's Lester at? That's what we need to know. Lester's going to win this damn thing. If that's going to be the case, I need to know what the score is. Parker Washington been helpful, says Scampers, especially more recently. Has a little more production, right? A little doubling up.
Yep.
So what do you got?
Jordan Whittington has really come on here lately with some of the kick returns. Jerome Ford, who I believe we're going to talk about here in a few minutes, has been doing some returning. We'll see if he continues to do that as he takes on more of the running back role. Darius Davis with the LA Chargers has a limited amount of offensive rolling, but he is very, very strong in the kick return game. He's got 700 yards almost now in punt and kickoff return so far this season to be 3rd in the league. And then the mercurial Marvin Mims, who I think for many of us in fantasy has been somewhere between a darling and a trash can recipient. He when he returns kicks is outstanding, and when he doesn't, well, he's not outstanding.
Yeah, Lester, that's not too bad, Lester. I'm pretty impressed. Definitely not all smoke there. Hello, Albert. Thanks for coming. So we're going to get into the free agents here, look at some kind of talk about some of the news associated with some of the free agents. So where are you at just so in your league, Jeff? Because as somebody who never makes it into the playoffs, explain to me where we're at.
Well, we're in the semifinals in most leagues. We're down to the final 4 in most of the managed leagues, and I am fortunate to be in some of those and not others. This was one of those rare seasons where my teams either did great or they were dumpster fires. So not much stress down the stretch, but here we are in the playoffs, and I took a tough loss this week. Superflex League, my quarterbacks were Brock Purdy and Matthew Stafford. So that tells you how that went.
This has been a brutal year for me, just in terms of like I'm in way more leagues than anyone has any business being in. I can't manage them all effectively. I have some that I pay way more attention to than others. And even in those, like the Kings Classic, I like to do really well. I got just totally hammered by JJ Zach Reeson. We were both winning in situations. I was well ahead of him. And he played Tim Patrick. I think, he's going to draw a little closer. But he also had Jamar Chase. That was like the 45-point week for Jamar Chase. So he knocked me out there. That's one that means a lot to me. I am in like a couple, like the Football Diehards Dynasty League, which is a big one where it's, I think, 32 teams, 216 teams, double copies of every player, 50-man rosters, full IDP. Made it in that. I made it in a couple. I'm feeling pretty good about the ones I made it in on. But, man, didn't make it in on nearly enough. I'm hoping to dial back next year. I say that every year, and it's a big, fat lie. Never do I actually dial back. So anyway, thanks everyone for coming here. I hope you're all having great success. Throw it in the chat if you're dominating something that you would like to share with us. I would like to hear about it. We're going to dive into the quarterback pool. As always, what I like to do here is start with Sigmund Bloom's Waiver Wire article. You can get it free at the website, Week 16 Waiver Wire picks. Sigmund offers up some bidding advice on those as well. And then Jeff and I will get into some that we like. We'll answer questions as we go by position, so we don't get caught behind here or anything. I don't want to get just piling the questions. We want to have a little discussion here. So we'll get to the questions. I know you're all very patient, and I appreciate that. By the way, I'm Bob Harris again. You can hear me on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 10 p.m. to midnight, Saturday nights, 8 to 11, and Sunday is 11 to 1. You can also hear the Daily Update podcast every morning at like 5:30 a.m., bright and early, to give you a little 10-minute dose of fantasy news to get your day started right. All kinds of stuff going on at the website. Go to footballguys.com. I just set my initial rankings for the week, so you can check those out. I will be adjusting right up through each round of kickoffs, but as will everyone else. So check them out and check out the projections too. Our projections crew is like nobody else on the planet. They've been doing this a very long time. They're fantastic at it. Moral Tremblay, Jason Wood, Justin Freeman, Bob Henry, Sigmund Bloom do fantastic work, and it's the basis for everything we do. So check that out if you get a chance. All right, Jeff, let's go. Quarterbacks. We got Bloom's list is not long. There's one I like, and there's one that horrifies me, but has some interesting pieces with them. Let's start with Aaron Rodgers. 2-game roll kind of going on. It seems like we're at the point where we're getting the Aaron Rodgers that kind of everyone thought they were buying at first, but never got. Like, we were drafting him as a quarterback 2, right? He's now delivering like on the potential. A quarterback 2 who could start for you any week. He is now in that he could start for you any week mode, right?
I would say so. I mean, he's got 600 yards over the last 2 weeks combined. He had thrown for 731 over the 4 weeks prior to that. He's been under 259 out of 14 weeks. So we are now sort of seeing that vintage Rodgers, or probably more vintage adjacent Rodgers, I think, at this point. He does seem to be not quite at what he was back in the day, but, who is at our advancing ages. But, the thing I think we got to sort of caution ourselves with Rodgers is that big outburst he had, his 3-touchdown, 30-point game this week, was against Jacksonville. And Jacksonville is terrible when it comes to defending against quarterbacks. He's got tougher matchups against the Rams and then at Buffalo the next couple of weeks, at least tougher than Jacksonville. They're both in the middle of the pack when it comes to giving up points to quarterbacks. So I wouldn't expect another 30-point outburst. But as you say, Bob, very good QB2 kind of numbers. I think that's pretty reliable. And obviously, if you're looking to pick him up off the waiver wire, he's one of the best choices that would be out there if he's available for you.
Yeah, it seems like the connection with Davante Adams has been reignited. I think that's a reasonable assessment that Garrett Wilson's still a viable play. He's had that hookup with Allen Lazard all along. So the big playability is there, or capabilities seem to be there. What does he have left, Jeff? Like, is we're playing Dynasty or we're thinking ahead, looking at next year? I mean, I'm pretty sure somebody's going to land him. I don't think he'll be a New York Jet. I don't think he'll end up in Minnesota and the Farvesk career arc that we'd all love to see. But Sam Darnold probably moving on. We'll see what happens with J.J. McCarthy. But what does he have left? Is it possible with both him and Kirk Cousins? And we're going to talk about Kirk Cousins here too. Is it possible that we're just seeing the reality that, especially with older players, but just players in general. I know Tony Pollard, we went through this with him last year where he came off the broken leg and said he wasn't really up to speed until week 10. Hell, I don't know if Kyle Pitts is still over the knee things that he dealt with a couple of years ago, right? So are we maybe asking to Christian McCaffrey, another example, so are we just asking too much or expecting too much of players? Do we need to be more mindful of the time it takes to come off major injuries? And is it possible we see a rebirth for Aaron Rodgers, maybe even Kirk Cousins next year?
Yes to all of that. I think one of the biggest lessons from this year in terms of how we were drafting, rather than drafting Christian McCaffrey as the 101 or spending a fairly high pick for folks like Rodgers or Cousins in anticipation of what those offenses were expected to do. I think we're trying to learn that we need to take off-season injury reports more seriously. We need to take into account more seriously when players are missing significant portions of training camp for one reason or another. And while that doesn't portend to a bad season at all, I think it does suggest that perhaps the high draft capital we're spending is better spent on other players that don't have those kinds of histories coming into the season, or that kind of age in the case of Rodgers and Cousins. When it comes to what the future holds for them, part of that's going to be based on their health, part of it's the system. But what I'm wondering is, we've seldom talked about something like an age cliff for quarterbacks, but it seems like when they hit it very, very hard. And Kirk Cousins just looks lost out there to me. He's like he is 4 or 5 seconds behind where the game actually is at any given moment. Like sometimes when my TV audio and video don't line up,
right.
It's kind of like that, and it's that jarring and that distracting to performance. Could he fit into a better system? Maybe there's an injury that we don't know about. That we'll find out about at the end of the season. But he is certainly, Cousins, but Rodgers in particular, better than a number of the other quarterbacks that are out there right now, but probably not the long-term future for anybody at this point. But it's certainly a bridge, perhaps to train a younger quarterback, whether that's Minnesota or some of the places that you were mentioning earlier. Certainly a possibility, but QB2 at best until they prove me wrong, I think.
I think Kirk Cousins is currently the bridge that might be about to collapse. I don't want to,
yes.
I don't want to overstate the case, but like Matt Waldman and I have talked about this early in the season. Matt's a huge proponent of Michael Penix Jr. and I can remember covering the draft, the night of the draft on Sirius, and Jeff Mans was apoplectic when they drafted. Thought it was the worst move ever. But I mean, when you've thought about it a little bit, like you have all these great skill players in Atlanta, and you're bringing in an older quarterback with that issue now, like. Granted, they had other needs like a pass rusher, and I keep saying they tried to trade up to get Leite Latu. I think, if had that happened, maybe we'd be having a different conversation about that pick of Penix. I think the shock wore off, and like you could see, for me, it was like, well, I would much rather them have a viable option to Kirk Cousins if something goes wrong to keep all the pieces I'm invested in on track than I am in their pass rusher. I don't care if they can sack the opposing quarterback. I want the opposing offense scoring points, so they have to. So, yes, I'm greedy as a fantasy manager. But it's possible Kirk Cousins, Matt alluded to this early on, that he just didn't look right to him. Couldn't step into throws and seemed to be having some of those issues. So this may be a case where he is like next year away, and we'll see. Maybe we'll get a look at Michael Penix. We'll talk about that in a second. So I do think there's a lot of I think Aaron Rodgers is making himself some money right now. Not that anyone wasn't already going to pay him, but this kind of ensures it, this late season run, even if it he dies on the vine right now, I think that 2 games is going to be enough for something. The Raiders, some team is going to have enough of a need at the position. The Tennessee Titans, there's the list goes on. Mac Jones is going to be a free agent. He's going to be in that pool too. Has he shown you something, or has Brian Thomas Jr. shown you something?
Well, Thomas has certainly shown me something, and I almost regret that I traded him away in a dynasty league earlier this year to try to win now. That probably canceled my winning later, so I better get it done in the next couple of weeks. But as for Jones, has he shown me something? Yes. Has he shown me that he can be a anything more than a lower to mid-tier QB2? I don't think so. I mean, even with the performance he had, 26 plus points last week, 26 plus points 2 weeks ago, in between 9 points. He's got a lackluster bit of talent around him. Jacksonville's in the bottom 6 in terms of points scored. And so it's hard to tell if he's having a fair evaluation because what the
Correct.
pieces around him are just not that great. So is he the sort of player that could have a Sam Darnold-esque kind of a second career when he lands with, and I don't want to call New England's coaches incompetent or their player development incompetent, but by the flip of that, a more competent kind of a situation, a scenario where more effort's going into the development of the players, and it's just a better situation all the way around. Can someone like Mac Jones succeed in a second career? And I meant Jacksonville, not New England, not that. It's Jacksonville's where he plays. But that's something I would be looking for in the future. I think when you're looking about choosing draft picks next year, Jones is kind of one of those low 13, 14, 15 round picks. It's probably worth putting on your roster to see what happens to him.
Yeah, I think the problem for him, you mentioned, I mean, the start in New England was miserable and he didn't have a lot of support there. They don't have a lot of playmakers. Drake May is kind of managing. Drake May, I'm impressed that he's shown what he's shown, considering the lack of offensive line, the lack of playmakers at wide receiver. I mean, Hunter Henry is his most reliable target in this offense. That says something. They haven't been running the ball well. Mm-hmm. So except for Drake May, I think there's a lot to like there. Mac Jones, it had been horrible. I think it's easy to forget how bad it's been so far this year. I mean, it's been bad until this last game was the first game he looked reasonably productive, and I thought he was drug along by the likes of Thomas, and who is having a phenomenal rookie season, by the way, as good as anybody out there, not named Malik Neighbors. So, and maybe, in some ways better than Malik Neighbors. But this is, again, my opportunity to tell you that wide receivers don't necessarily need the best quarterback in the NFL to succeed, right? And I think we keep doing this. It's more of a draft situation when you're in your summertime phase and you're looking at wide receivers who are slipping down the draft boards because people are concerned about their quarterback play. Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. would like you to know there is hope. And they're only the latest in a long, long list of players who have shown us this. And so don't dial back. Maybe there are decisions you have to make week to week. I mean, look, it's not ideal last week. I mean, Calvin Ridley did not fare well because Will Levis, I believe, the only player in the league to score fewer points than Cooper Kupp. And that's because they were negative. I think who else was negative? Somebody else.
There was a -3 by somebody. I'm trying to remember who that was.
DTR was Dorian Thompson Robinson come in and get negative points too. I think so. I think that's possible. Anyway, that's where we're at. So let's put ourselves in the shoes. I could see myself grabbing Aaron Rodgers for no other reason than to keep somebody else from getting him. Exactly. And if I haven't spent my fab yet, that's not an unreasonable price at 20 to 40%. I cannot see myself grabbing Mac Jones. I'm hoping someone else takes him and rolls with him.
Yeah, I will say this about Jones for this week because, we're doing a waiver show and it sounds like we don't want this guy, and maybe we don't. But he does tend to avoid sacks. He's had just 7 total in his 5 starts, so he's staying up on his feet. And they're playing Vegas this week. Vegas is missing some key players on D, particularly
Max Crosby.
Yep. So if there is a game, if you needed a spot starter for this week and Rodgers is off the board, Mac Jones is in the kind of position where he could be a success this week as a fill-in. But I certainly wouldn't think of him as who I'd want to start going forward. But if I were desperate today, I would certainly think about that.
Right. We'll get into it when we get into some of our others, but there are a handful of quarterback changes, not the least of which, as we mentioned, DTR coming in, Dorian Thompson-Robinson coming in for Jameis Winston. Looks like Mason Rudolph will get the start in Tennessee. Looks like Aiden O'Connell will be back for the Raiders. Every Brock Bowers investor would like to thank their happy stars for that. Here we go. The elite talents at wide receiver can make the difference between poor quarterback plays or the next best option that is a poor quarterback is at least a YOLO. Totally true. Yeah. Totally true. Nothing better than YOLO quarterbacks. I started both Amari and Kupp and survived. Ooh,
wow.
Boy.
Congratulations, Lester.
That's how you fare well in the Football Guys Bowl. So there's going to be a lot of turnover at the quarterback position this week. We'll see how it affects some of the other pieces. There was a lot of injuries. One of the heaviest injury weeks we've seen as well. So let's dive into Bloom's running backs in the waiver wire. I think the top of his list should be the top of everyone's list. Jerome Ford comes in. He's got him at a 50% or 100%. How willing are you to go up to the 100%?
Well, at this point, I don't have much left, so I think 100% is pretty much all I could go. It's like pushing your chips all in a poker game when you basically have the small blind left. I mean, you got to go for what you can go for. Ford's clearly the man for the season. I mean, he's got a minor role in the passing game, significant role in the rushing game. Up until this point, a significant role in the return game. We'll see if that holds. And he seems to do very well when the team is losing. He's got 67% of his rushing yards and 82% of his receiving yards when the team is behind. And with DTR at quarterback, the team is most likely going to be behind for a lot of this game. The implied score for Cleveland's 21. I think that was before the DTR announcement. My guess is that number will slide down a little bit. And so Ford, to me, is going to be the guy, but he's going to be a guy on an offense that's not going to do
Right.
a whole lot.
Right. You worry about offenses that aren't staying on schedule for the running backs. That said, I mean, we all saw, what was it, a 62-yard touchdown run where, man, the Jets on that guy were most impressive.
Yep.
Would we feel better? So Kendra Miller's the next guy on Bloom's list. He's on there because Alvin Kamara obviously having injury issues. We'll see that there has been no word through 2 full days suggests not good things to me. Kendra Miller's looked pretty good. It looked pretty explosive. Seems to have rebounded. Dennis Allen would have nothing to do with him. Darren Rizzi is seeing it differently. And how is Jeff Blaylock seeing it?
Well, I've always been a fan of Kendra Miller. I am a TCU Horned Frog, go Frogs, and so I got to
right
watch
up the street from me.
Kendra a little bit when he was in college. My issue with him in this situation, in the context of fantasy football right now, is actually just that the fact the game is in Green Bay, because somebody at the NFL and the networks thought that a night game in Green Bay in December was a great idea. The forecast says about 15 degrees at kickoff. These are not ideal conditions. New Orleans has got a backup quarterback, backup wide receivers. There's no Taysom Hill. And they've got the lowest implied score in a couple of the sports books I looked at today at 14.5 points. So, once again, you have a guy who's going to be the guy, but with an offense that's probably not going to do a whole lot with him being the guy. Like Ford, capable of running a 67, 70-yard touchdown run at any moment, but also, like Ford, also continually only getting the ball 10 or 12 times because they only have the ball for 18 minutes.
Yeah, that is a problem. So I guess when I'm looking at the running backs in particular, I'm thinking about opportunities. Those two seem to have the best shots. I mean, Ford is sewed in. If Alvin Kamara misses, and I suspect he will, we won't know that until we're a day behind because of the Monday night, so that always makes things a little easier. But Tyjae Spears came in. Looks like he'll have a role either way in this offense. And I guess we could say the same for Kenneth Gainwell. We'll talk about some others here in a few minutes. But of those two, which one appeals to you more?
I would say that, Gainwell's on the better offense, but I think he gets less opportunity, although he is really good at vulturing those tight ends because, as we know, Bob, and as I have suffered through it all season long, fly, Eagles, fly, but Saquon loves to get tackled at the 1-yard line. Which allows for other folks to get those touchdowns. That's happened all season long. Gainwell's one of those people who gets that. Jalen Hurts, good old tush push. So Gainwell's, to me, got more of an opportunity to get in from the 1-yard line. Spears, though, may have the better opportunity to playing time. Pollard's a little banged up. He's got one touchdown already of the season, which he vultured from Pollard when Pollard had to step out of the game for a few minutes. Our Adam Hutchinson thinks that Pollard will play next week, but he'll probably miss practice all week. It'll be another one of those maddening situations for Pollard managers. I would say if you are a Pollard manager and Spears is available, I would go get him because he is a plug-and-play replacement if Pollard's not going to play.
Yeah, I think that's 100% true. And I agree with you on both these guys. Like all these guys, and I don't disagree with what Steve Pavia just said. I mean, those guys, we kind of highlighted. They are in lousy offenses. That's part of the deal. But sometimes you get to this point of week 16, like what are a couple things we're looking for? And that, like, not that we should necessarily count on, but that we hope for. Like every year, somebody is going to win you a fantasy championship that nobody banked on winning them a fantasy championship. Like if Jerome Ford came up with a running back 1 week at the right time, a multi-touchdown game at the right time, fell into the goal line, fell into the end zone on a couple goal line carries at the right time. Same with Spears. Same with any of these guys. It could change the outcome of a championship. So that's why we bring them up. And not everybody has those needs. And not everyone has suffered the attrition. And if that's you, I'm happy for you. If it's not, we might have to spend some money. Let's look at the wide receivers here on Bloom's list. Rashad Bateman, Matt Waldman and I talked about this earlier in the week, Jeff. Matt feels like Bateman's finally being used the way he should be used as a deep threat in a more well-rounded offense. Look, Derrick Henry's the key to opening all doors or knocking them in or something. I mean, it's just obviously having a great rushing attack with a threat like that makes things great. Having a great quarterback like Lamar Jackson makes it great. But what we haven't seen at this point is like heavy use of the wide receivers. I think this year we've seen a shift away from the tight ends, which have been the primary weapons in that offense in recent years, to the wide receivers, Zay Flowers, and now Bateman coming on. Do you like Bateman down the stretch?
Oh, I would love to like Bateman coming down the stretch. I think he's another one of those guys that we've always thought was going to be more than he's been. Maybe it's the offensive scheme. I don't think it's talent. I think he certainly can thrive in environments where Lamar Jackson's got to improvise a little bit, run around, and create opportunities. But the risk with Bateman is just a very, very low floor. Because we can watch him just completely disappear. Some games we need to put him on the side of a milk carton. He can go alongside Cooper Kupp this week on that milk carton. But Bateman, to me, he is one of those kinds of guys that I think can just really, really struggle without a long play. I mean, this week he had 80 yards and 2 touchdowns on 3 catches. So if one of those touchdowns doesn't go for long, we're talking 1 touchdown and 40 yards on 3 catches, which is okay for a waiver wire replacement. But then if that doesn't happen, we're talking almost nothing. And so there's a boom bust quality to Bateman that concerns me. The other concern, you already mentioned him, was Derrick Henry. Well, where was he last week? The offense does indeed tend to run through him, except last week when it didn't. Surely he will be more involved going forward, and that may keep action so much at the line of scrimmage. Yeah, Bateman may get, one long play or another. If he can complete that, great. If he doesn't, you have a 0. Congratulations.
As I think about all these wide receivers on the list, to me, they're more DFS plays than season long. I would have to be in like super dire straits, but some people might be in dire straits. I think those bid totals are right. Jalen Coker is a huge favorite of a narrow band of people on my internet who tell me he is great. I've seen him show signs of greatness. I still think he is not a primary option. We don't know. I mean, I don't think we're at the point where they're going to pull Bryce Young out, but we can see the Bryce Young's maybe a little bit uneven, a little up and down at times this year. Is there a receiver not named Adam Thielen that you would be okay playing in this Carolina offense?
No. Just straight up no. Thielen is a target hog right now. He's mopping up everything that's available. I mean, you have Xavier Legette, who's probably not going to be playing this week with his groin injury. So that opens up 4 targets. Thielen will probably end up with 3 of them. And so with Coker, I mean, my fear with Coker is we're going to be chasing a 1-week blip, a 1-week high performance, and hoping that will repeat itself. He's still a fairly low target, 0 or something good kind of a receiver. If I were looking at this waiver wire today, I actually would probably look at Jalen McMillan. I think he is really the option here. He's kind of become the number 2 wide receiver behind Mike Evans. Evans, of course, is otherworldly at times, including this week. Congratulations to those of you who moved on to your playoffs because of Mike Evans.
That would be me.
Yeah, that would be you. So very good. And then, of course, McMillan's got Dallas this week. In a game that is, could be very high scoring, a lot of offense, a lot of big plays. And so if you wanted me to roll the dice on one of these 3 receivers we've talked about who's capable of a big play and not giving me a 0 at the same time, I think it's Jalen McMillan.
Here's what I roll the dice on, Jeff. I roll the dice on volume, and that's what I don't see with Bateman. I don't see with Coker, but the last 2 games, I think over 20%. Let me look so I don't say something stupid. 25 and 23% target shares over the last 2 games. He's basically moved ahead of Cade Otton, who was and by the way, Otton, took the big hit when Evans returned. He was up there in the 25+% target share range. Evans came back and has been totally dominant, but McMillan has come on. I'm kind of with you on this one. He is the piece that I would want to play. It's an aggressive offense. Thank you, Baker Mayfield. We appreciate you for that, sir. It's against Dallas, as you mentioned, on Sunday night. We could all watch it happen and play out in real time. You got to love that. I think this is the correct call. And and if I was in a pinch, I think he is a wide receiver 3 level play for me at this point. The touchdown upside is great, but it's the volume that I'm chasing. If I'm chasing volume, I'm going to chase it at tight end too. And Brenton Strange is the guy I think we've had a taste of him earlier in the year, right? When there has been no Evan Ingram, he's been pretty busy. But I think the bigger issue for me here, or the biggest plus, Jeff, is that the funnel here is narrow. It's Brian Thomas Jr. and now Brenton Strange.
Yes, but that's okay. If you are a strange manager, and Brenton Strange, not strange as in weird,
very strange.
And if you need a waiver wire plug-in this week at tight end, a position that's been kind of a desert for much of the year, Strange is probably the best one. He is the one out of this list that I see here from Sig that's got volume, almost built-in volume into his game because of the way, not only the way Mac Jones plays, but simply the way that offense seems to operate. He's had more than 50 receiving yards 3 times. He's kind of become that number 2 option, you said, and he's consistently getting 7 to 10 targets a game. That's more than the receivers we've been talking about have been getting. And so if you're in a flex situation, Strange might be somebody I'd consider even over the wide receivers we were just talking about.
I would agree. And so we do have a question here from Andrew Goodman. How nervous should I be about Cooper Pickens? Pickens did not practice today, by the way.
Pickens is probably not playing, so I'd be nervous about him.
So we'll see. Cup, I'm less nervous about. Are one of these waiver wire receivers worth it to protect myself from these low floors? Would you rather have Jalen McMillan than the remaining Pittsburgh receivers not named Pickens?
Yes, I think I would rather have McMillan over the remaining Pittsburgh receivers not named Pickens. But I wouldn't get cute and play him over someone like Cooper Kupp.
No, that would be against the rules. We don't allow that here. Honestly, I get it. He's capable of having a 0 game. How do I know this? I just saw it. Is that that was his first shutout in terms of catches since 2019 in a healthy game. I don't think that's going to be the norm. So, yeah, I think – Jeff, we get to this point of the season, and I think it's a problem for people. It's a problem for me. I'm trying to outsmart myself. I'm fidgeting with my lineups. I'm looking at players that have been locked in starters all season long, and I'm thinking, whoa, that matchup, though, and this guy's matchup. What is the answer to that? I feel like my radio co-host, Mike Dempsey, has come up with a great solution. You put the names in a bag, you pull the names out of the bag one at a time, and you say, I'm starting the one I pull out of the bag. And when you pull it out, you go, I can't start him.
Yeah.
There's your answer, right?
Let me start again. Right. Well, I'd say the first thing is a couple of things. First thing is however you got here, and that's how you go forward. So whatever kinds of strategies and thinking you were going into and setting your lineups up until this point is how you want to go forward. Second thing is I wouldn't second guess myself once I've made a decision on a player. That's who you go with. I've heard folks talking about swapping, and I heard this actually on ESPN's program on Sunday morning. One of their top analysts swapping the same 2 guys in and out of their lineup 10 times in half an hour, unable to choose. I say pick one and go with it, and then just leave it alone. But I think one of the most important things is just don't get cute. I mean, if you're in a situation like, well, I'm afraid Cooper Kupp's going to have another dismal game because of whatever reasons, and then here's this guy who is normally a wide receiver 3-4, but he's in a great situation, great opportunity to do something. What I'd say is if your playoff lives are on the line, would you rather play Cooper Kupp and have him be a little bit of a disappointment and that other guy potentially go off, or would you rather play the guy who most likely isn't going off and watch Cooper Kupp get 30 points while you watch someone else win your championship next week?
Correct. We have a couple questions here about Marvin Harrison Jr. I missed it. What do you do? For me, the answer is pretty simple. You treat him for what he is. You divorce the name from the numbers and the draft capital invested in him, which is difficult, right? Because we had hopes and expectations. If you get a chance, go listen to the podcast that I can't say the name of without being reprimanded, that Matt Wallman and I do on Mondays. You can find it on our X feed. But this is an expectations game, right? Maybe our expectations, along with the Cardinals, were not correct coming into the season, but we're at where we're at now, regardless. How do you treat Marvin Harrison Jr.?
I think exactly to say. I mean, he is certainly not living up to the preseason hype. Bob, you've been talking to Waldman. You know that early in the season he was talking about that there are various flaws in Harrison's game,
Yep.
particularly at the point of the catch. We've watched this in real time this season. Harrison is getting the volume. He's just not necessarily making the catches. If he makes some more of those catches, we're not having this conversation at all. But he hasn't made them for various reasons. And so he becomes kind of a risky flex play that's capable of scoring 25 points and capable of scoring 3.
This was another case, and I went on the stage at the Fantasy Football Expo, and I had great success last year explaining why I was drafting Jahmyr Gibbs over Bijan Robinson. And it wasn't I was drafting him over him; I was waiting for him in the 4th round. So that went so well for me 2 years ago that I thought this past year I went with the Malik Neighbors versus Marvin Harrison Jr. for the same exact reason. Why am I drafting that guy that I can get in the 4th round in the 1st round when we're drafting all these players that perceive ceilings that we don't know if they'll ever reach? And I think paying a premium for these guys is what gets us in the problem and forces us to make these tough decisions. And I think just more on the point, Andrea, to answer your question, the answer is you treat him like what he is right now, right? And I know on your teams you have way better options than Marvin Harrison Jr. because I've seen your questions, and I think you trust those other options. I think this is an interesting point too. I felt like all season long you're playing whack-a-mole if you're playing a Packers wide receiver. One of them is going to be great. You don't know which one. I think that's become even more pronounced, although I do think Christian Watson is starting to take a step ahead for me. Romeo Doubs would like me to think otherwise. Week 15, Romeo Doubs says not so fast. But I do think Watson, the target shares have gone his way. And I think that big play athleticism, I love that he trusted the scientists, Jeff. They fixed his hamstrings. Things are well in that regard. Now, if only the next trip will be to the hand scientists this offseason and we can turn him into 100% great receiver, I'll be very happy. But I think that's the problem for me with Packers wide receivers. The Packer we all want to play right now is named Josh Jacobs, and we don't all have him. So, if you want to be forcing Jaden Reed into lineups, you're taking your chances. If you want to play Romeo Doubs, I feel a little more confident in him, but you're still taking your chances. Christian Watson, I feel increasingly confident with, still taking your stances. Not that I mind the 9th round price tag I paid for him, but I think, I'm looking for guys that are being more consistently productive, especially this time of year, unless you look at your opponent's roster and you're facing Josh Allen and Jamar Chase, or, swing for the fence plays. I think that's where Christian Watson comes into play.
I'm with you there, Bob. I think that's kind of the similar advice here with Harrison. You've got a player who's capable of a wide range of outcomes. Most of them aren't great, but some of those outcomes are extraordinary. And if you catch that one on the right day, that can lift you to a victory. So as you're looking at your lineups for this weekend, and you're down to the last 2 or 3 spots, think to yourself, what do I need? Do I need a solid floor play? Do I just need to get 10 or 12 points out of the slot so I can move on? Or am I up against Josh Allen and Jamar Chase, and I need to swing for the fences and get somebody who can really go off? And I think in that choice, that changes who you might pick on the Packers. If you need the floor, I don't know, you pick anybody on the Packers if you can stay away from it. But if you're going for the ceiling, as you said, Watson seems to be recovered from his injury. He's capable of a big play. Reed, to me, is probably the one who is most capable of that. But we've seen what happens when he doesn't. So these are now what I'd call the ceiling plays that you make when you realize that your floor is not enough to beat the other guy.
Isn't Cooper Rush one of those guys?
Cooper
going
Rush
against Carolina
is one of those guys. Yes, yeah,
it was a great game. It was quarterback 8. He's got Tampa Bay this week. Do we like that matchup?
I do like that matchup. I think you've got a really strong, really high scoring game potential. Dallas has got a lot of weapons, even though they haven't necessarily all worked together or correctly this season. They are still capable of doing quite a bit. Tampa Bay allows the 2nd most points to quarterbacks this season. And you've got a pretty high over-under in this game. The line I looked at this morning had it at 48.5. That's second only to the Detroit-San Francisco game, which I must assume is all for Detroit because I can't see San Francisco scoring that many points the way they've been playing lately. Rush's got 20 fantasy points in 4 of his last 5 starts. So he is definitely one of those guys who I think can put together a pretty steady game, not spectacular, but probably not terrible. That said, one of his last 5 games was terrible.
I think more so than the other guys on this list this week. So Carson Wentz, by the way, Patrick Mahomes practiced fully today, fully in the very gentle walkthrough that they held. And the Chiefs are probably going to hold nothing but walkthroughs. I don't think they'll do any real practices or what we would consider practices. I don't know if they're going to. They've got 3 games in 11 days. Pat Mahomes has a mild high ankle sprain, in case you somehow missed it, people. And Carson Wentz is standing by. I don't think there's a universe in which I'd be wanting to play Carson Wentz, nor would I be interested in snagging him to prevent somebody else. I would be encouraging other people to grab him, even though Andy Reid would like me to think that Carson Wentz is a very good quarterback and can do great things.
I probably see him a little bit more favorably than you do, Bob. And part of that is just because of the offense that he is now playing in. Kansas City's got lots of weapons. They've got great coaching. They have if they know in advance that Wentz is going to be the guy, they can design a game plan around that and around his capabilities. And you might say to me, well, but he's not Patrick Mahomes. And I'd say, well, Patrick Mahomes hasn't been either so far this season. And they seem to be doing okay with that. Now, maybe not great from a fantasy scoring standpoint, but perhaps enough. Certainly, if your other choices are Dorian Thompson-Robinson and Mason Rudolph, and the possibility that Michael Penix might actually play.
Right.
So part of it is supply and demand. If the high quality folks we've talked about, Rodgers, Jones, Rush, are gone, Wentz is probably the next guy I would be looking at.
Yeah, I think I didn't do a good job making my point. You made my point, though. It's the quarterback is not the scoring machine here. The days of Patrick Mahomes being a weekly quarterback one at the high end, top front half of the quarterback one situation, we're not seeing that anymore. It's rarely in the quarterback one ranks when he finishes. I think he's had a couple games this year, at least 2, maybe 3. And prior to that, it had been week 12 last year since his previous quarterback one finish. So I think it's more about the offense than it is about the quarterback. And we'll see. I'm with you. I think the Dorian Thompson-Robinson, Mason Rudolph, although I think he is like, if you were playing Will Levis and you have a sudden Will Levis size hole in your roster, go get a jar of mayonnaise and dip Mason Rudolph in it and have at it. I think there's it's a push there. These guys are washed. So Michael Penix to me would be like a speculative play that I can't imagine playing, but keeping him from the Kirk Cousins manager in a super flex league, if they haven't been already wise enough to do that, would not be a bad move to me. Some running backs of interest. Craig Reynolds, we've seen this movie before on the Netflix, apparently. Sione Vaki, also in Detroit, the rookie. Alexander Madison and Amir Abdullah. We don't know what's going on with Sincere McCormick. Haven't heard any updates, but the fact that he was left and gone. Dameon Pierce as a proactive play. It was limited practice for Joe Mixon today, but I think he'll be fine. And I have to include Kamani Vidal because somebody will be mad if I don't. I'm not a big Kamani Vidal guy. He did get 35 snaps last week, so good for him. Doesn't turn it into a lot of production. I think of all these guys, would Craig Reynolds be the top of the list just because the contingent upside is something were to happen to Jahmyr Gibbs?
Maybe. Maybe. I'm looking at, Alexander Madison and Amir Abdullah, and not because I think they're just outstanding, but they have a clearer pathway to actual volume with, I think, Sincere McCormick. That, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I don't know what that injury is actually was going to be, but it didn't look good. And so Madison, even though he's been terribly inefficient, I think his first 3 or 4 carries this week were a fumble and a safety. So not the best glowing recommendation there. But there's a pathway to volume, Abdullah as well as that backup. Reynolds, you're asking for an injury to happen there. And that's something, right, Bob, you and I don't think ever want to wish upon or be using as a strategy. But if you're talking about a speculative ad for a potential playoff run or to have for this week or next week, he's certainly probably one of the better ones on this list. I would say Dameon Pierce is a definite pass for me. He's got 1 carry for 54 yards. The rest of them totaled 46. So I would leave him. I'd let someone else pick him up and hopefully put him in their starting lineup.
Yeah, I totally agree, by the way. I was going to get to the Raiders backs, and just for me right now, I'd almost rather have Abdullah in a PPR league than I would Madison, just because he's a little more dynamic in the receiving game. And that would be my question to you, is if you had to choose one of the two, who would it be? Would it be as easy as standard versus PPR?
For me, it is. So that may be my own naivete at work here, or my wish casting on this really lousy Raiders backfield situation.
Agree.
But Madison, to me, I think is the play for non PPR, and Abdullah for the PPR kinds of strategies because of their differences in the passing game and how Abdullah is used. And for those in Scott Fishbowl, Abdullah has been returning some picks too. So there's a little bit of upside there for the 250 of us still looking looking for edges to get to the final 50.
And some other outliers here that I threw up with together. Malik Washington now, it seems like Jalen Waddle, the injury isn't serious, but he could miss this week. Stone Cold Smart, the great smart bomb. If you can't fire the dismissal, you can drop the smart bomb at any time. Tyler Higbee shows up this week. They'd activated him today.
Yeah.
These are kind of grasping a straw type plays for you. Anyone rise above that here?
Well, we'll go back to Scott Fishbowl for a second. Malik Washington has been a dynamite kick returner the last couple of weeks. So he is definitely
so give him a role as a receiver.
And he's getting more of a role as a receiver. So that is certainly something there. In terms of these two tight ends, yuck. I'd almost rather go with Foster Moreau because he just seems to find a way to fall into the end zone.
I'm having this Stone Smart slander here. I wasn't ready for that.
Oh, dear.
I don't know that you're wrong. I don't know that you're wrong. So a couple questions here before we close it out. By the way, if you just tuned in, I'm Bob Harris. Thanks for coming. Glad to have you. We're here every Tuesday night. Probably won't be here next Tuesday night. I'm told it's Christmas Eve and not everyone wants to come on with me unless, I don't know. Like
Christmas Eve. Okay.
This is what my sources tell me. I don't have this confirmed yet, but I'll work on it. In the meantime, I will be here Saturday. I'll be here next Saturday as well for the 11 a.m. live streams. You can get lineup questions there. I see some of those as well. You can hear me on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio every damn day except for Wednesday, 10 to midnight on the weeknights, 8 to 11 on Saturday, 11 to 1 on the game day edition of the pregame show at Sirius. You can find all my work at footballguys.com, including my rankings, which I just now published the initial set. Check that out. You can also find Jeff Blaylock there. He does fantastic work. What's coming out? I believe, is it going to be tomorrow or is it tonight?
I have got hopefully in the Dynasty Roundtable. I've still got to settle on which player hurt me the most this weekend, and there's a long list to pick from.
All right. Well, watch for that. Watch for Jeff Blaylock's work along with all our new staffers. Great group. So tons of content coming out, So we'll get into this question. Yes. To me, like depending on who your options are, if you have a starting running back in an offense that relies heavily on the running back, I would be playing Kendry Miller on Monday Night Football. It's not ideal, but if you're in that situation, if you had Alvin Kamara and this is your fallback plan, I could think of worse outcomes. Your thoughts, Jeff?
I agree, and I agree with the second part of Adam's question. Yes, you should lower your expectations a little bit.
Correct.
He's a backup, and it's going to be bitterly, bitterly cold in Green Bay. Not the best ideal situation for a Southern Dome team to be in.
I don't know who told you that hoarding tight ends was okay, Cleveland Sanders, but it kind of is. I think all these guys are like – I like the way Laporte has come on a little bit down the stretch here. The target share has gone up over 20%. That looks like too many tight ends to me. Do you have endless space on your roster? Maybe. What do you think, Jeff?
I think this would be a great opportunity to keep Strange out of someone else's hands if someone else needed a tight end. And since Cleveland there's got all of them, it's distinctly possible that someone he's going to face in the playoffs needs a tight end. So if you've got the bench space, Strange one of the best options at that position available. If there's somebody that you're not going to play in another position, why not? Hoarding is not always a bad thing, especially if your opponent needs a tight end. You'd much rather him pick up Foster Moreau and hope he falls into the end zone.
I think the Browns have done this, so I feel like you're free to move on, Andrew Goodman. And it's funny, I've been asking beat writers in Cleveland, is it, about the possibility of them retaining this year Winston, unlike what they did last year with Joe Flacco, because they didn't want the specter of a viable quarterback sticking around when they knew they had to play Deshaun Watson. I feel like keeping Winston makes even more sense in that when you frame it like that. But I don't know if that's their plan. I think they're going to have different plans. I'm not sure that they're going to see Deshaun Watson as a future starter at this point, just a future money sponge. I don't know. We'll find out. But yeah, I think Jameis. You think Jameis Winston's droppable at this point?
I do. If you need that spot for somebody else, I wouldn't hold on to him just for the possibility that he might play next week. I mean, if we were in week 5, that might be a different conversation. But you now need people that can contribute right now, and he's not one of them.
Buddy P. Moon is ready to bail on Hopkins, probably out of concerns of the quarterback situation. Is that a bridge too far?
I would say so at this point. I mean, I love what McMillan's doing, but he is not necessarily got the target share of the roles that Hopkins might have. I'm, as I said earlier, not as concerned about the quarterback situation in Kansas City. I think there's plenty of room for him. So if this is, I assume, buddy, you were talking about in a bench position and not necessarily in starting lineup position. If we're talking about a bench situation, I would keep Hopkins. If it were starting lineup, I would probably consider some of the other names we've been mentioning today.
If you were picking up a streaming defense, this is how I decide my defense. This is when I don't know the scoring system and we're just answering questions. This is how we do it. What's the quarterback you want to attack?
Wow, those are some good ones there. The Giants to me are always a good team to attack. Rudolph is not going to be, in all likelihood, the turnover machine that Levis is, but he's also capable of getting sacked a number of times. And Indianapolis defense, I think, is a little underrated and underappreciated.
They're coming on.
So I think of those 3 defenses I see there, Indianapolis is the one I would take. I do love me a DeVito Boyle possibility, but I just like Indianapolis's defense a little bit better.
Yeah, I think Indy's kind of come on. You know, it's funny how we get a perception in our mind. Indy has been opened up. It's not a good defense. They didn't have Brenton Buckner for a while. I mean, it just didn't seem to be working. People were pushing. They were kind of pushovers. They've been less that lately. All right. I don't see any more questions, so we will get ready to call it a day out here. Again, what articles are we looking at this week from you?
For me, it's just going to be in the Dynasty Roundtables. If one of my submissions there counts. Again, next week we'll be doing some more waiver wire or start sit. We aren't going to do that this week, though.
All right, perfect. And we'll look for all that. You can find my notebook, fantasy notebook, on the site on Thursday. In and Out with Gary Davenport and me, or no, that's In and Out on Saturday with me. Polarizing Players with Gary Davenport on me on Friday. Rankings available. Projections are up now, so get all the good stuff that you need to go out and stomp a little tail this week. Get the daily update email. That's available too. Me, Bloom, Cecil Lammy putting together the news every day. Joe Bryant, send it to your inbox. It's fantastic. It's free. You could subscribe and unsubscribe at any time. There's nothing better except the premium content, so get that too. I'm Bob Harris. I will see you here Saturday, 11 a.m. This is Jeff Blaylock. You'll see him back with me at some point. Follow him on the X at Jeff Blaylock. On the Blue Ski, too. I'm there as well. You can find me at a Football Die Hard on both those sites. And we will see you next time. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.